Hot but not too spicy, this is podcast 121 from Profitable Hospitality.
Welcome to the world of hospitality success. This is the Profitable Hospitality Podcast with your host, Ken Bergen.
Hi, it's Ken Bergen here from ProfitableHospitality.com. Today we're talking about how to profit from senior dining, and my guest is Aaron Fish. He's an executive in a large senior living community, and he's got a very solid background in restaurants and food service outside that environment, and he brings all the kind of awareness and sensitivity and knowledge of food and understanding of restaurant quality customer service into food service there. And of course the range of residents in those places varies enormously. It varies from people who might be 60 and through to people who might be 96 or whatever. So, a huge range of people. And it's actually one of the first things that Aaron raised with me. I approached him, I said, you're the expert in this area, and do you want to have a chat about this? And he says, well, what do you mean by senior? Were you talking about, the 60-year-olds to the 70-year-olds or older than that? And anyway, of course, it was obvious. But, this is a long time, isn't it? Between the age of 60 and 100, that's 40 years. That's often more time than a lot of people have actually worked, or almost the same. So it's a huge area. What I love about it is the possibilities for restaurants too, because this talk is not about, Aaron's going to talk about the work he does, his background there in senior living communities, but I'm really focused on the possibilities for restaurants, because if you look at the census data for your place, and it's all available online, it's amazing the number of people between, let's say you just said between 60 and 75, they're lively, they're active, they've retired, they've still got money, they've kicked the kids out, so they're spending on themselves rather than others. I suppose there's grandchildren sometimes. But, huge possibilities here. But we do need to think about the menu and the service and the welcome and the marketing and all those sorts of things. Not to dumb it down, but just, realign it sometimes. Anyway, this is a very interesting conversation. So please listen up to this, because I know at times I've done newsletter on this topic, not too often, because I always track my open rates, and whenever I've done something on a topic like this, the open rate is way down, and I think, well, what is that about? Because really I'm looking a bit here at opportunities. Anyway, let's get into it shortly. Don't forget my usual reminder, the show notes for today and Aaron's contact details. You find those, go to profitablehospitality.com. There's a link there. Love to get your comments. Love to get your comments in all the usual places, on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, or possible. Flick me a tweet back on Twitter at Ken Bergen. That's actually the way Aaron and I started connecting, I think, originally, and then we kind of picked up the conversation in other ways. Facebook, of course, and Instagram. I love posting Instagram. I've got to do a podcast soon on Instagram tactics, because it's awesome. And Profitable Hospitality, all one word, we are on Instagram. Anyway, let's dive in now. How to profit from senior dining. My guest is Aaron Fish. Hello, it's Ken Bergen here from ProfitableHospitality.com, and today I'm talking to Aaron Fish, and he's based in the US, I'm based in Australia, and we're talking about, well, the title I gave him initially was How to Profit from Senior Dining, and actually when I look at it now, I wrote that a couple of months ago. I think maybe it looks a little crass, but my intention is really to talk about first of all, what are seniors, and the whole restaurant and dining environment, because boy, is this a huge demographic, and in many ways a neglected one. Just so many opportunities there. Anyway, I've gone to an expert to talk about this. Aaron works originally in the restaurants and now in senior services and residential care and food service there. So I'll let him explain his background, but I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion. Aaron, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Ken. A little bit on my background. I started as a very young lad in restaurants, washing dishes, and just kind of worked my way up, wound up becoming a food and beverage manager at a hotel. And then just by, I guess, happenstance wound up in senior dining.
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing that for a little over 12 years now. So I've held positions as an on-site director and been a corporate director of food and beverage and even a regional director for multiple.
So there's something about
companies.
it that you obviously really like. People don't, with your background, don't just keep doing it for 12 years because, senior dining, in some ways, it flies under the radar in food and beverage, doesn't it? It's it's such a massive segment, but it certainly doesn't get the kind of glamour headlines. It's not in the weekly restaurant reviews section in the paper, is it?
Very true, very true. It's an interesting industry segment to be in. When I first got into it, it was very, institutionalized. But over the past decade or so, it's really evolved a lot and really kind of reflects a lot of what you see in the current trends in food and restaurants and dining in general.
Yeah.
So very interesting film.
My brother-in-law used to be a purser on cruise ships, which is kind of like the food and beverage director, and a lot of other things. And he went into when he decided to give up, had to settle down with his family, and went into aged care and all sorts of areas. And he really had a tough time for quite a while because he was wanting to bring that professionalism in, and he found so many of the situations were really some kind of extension of what kindly mothers do. We all love our mothers, and
right.
But all that kind of the shortcuts and the this'll do and that'll do, and food safety. What's that?
Exactly.
It was really a challenge.
Yeah, I would say I got lucky when I got into senior dining. My boss at the time, the chief operating officer for the community I was at, her whole entire mindset was we need to have a hospitality-minded approach to dining. It's not just feeding people. We provide service.
Yeah.
And so I think that mindset was really what kind of pushed me to continue doing that for such a long time.
Yeah, nice one. So when we were first discussing about the topic, and you said, well, hang on, this word seniors, we need to slice that up as well, because it's true, we're going, given that most people are going to be living to the age of 100 or so, it's a scary thought, but, between the age of 60 and 100, that's 40 long years, but you'd sort of segment that into different groups. How do you divide it up?
Well, yeah, there really are two different demographics inside that kind of 50 to 100 age group. We have what we call the silents, which is the older age group, which, it's about the 70 to 95 or so age group, born between 1925 and 1945. And then the one that everybody knows about, which is the baby boomers. That's the 51 to 69 age group.
People who kind of don't quite see themselves as seniors yet either, do they? A lot of them.
Right. Yeah.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. The baby boomers are really right there at that cusp of some are seniors, some are not seniors, and when you think about the word seniors in this, so it really is interesting, kind of how these two segments they're right there together, but they're very, very different.
So, and how does that play out where you're working?
Well,
have you got a majority of the older segment, or a lot of the baby boomers as well?
Yeah, typically, in the type of communities that I've worked in, the average age of entry is between 74 and 78.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, the bulk of those are what we'd call silents.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because a lot of the people that are involved in the decision making are those adult children who fall into that next demographic of baby boomers.
Okay, yep, mm-hmm. Yep.
So you kind of have to understand
this
both.
is the customer in a sense, isn't it?
Exactly. You think about when you get them initially and marketing to them, and then it's the longer term of providing the service and the quality and the experience they want.
Yeah, the parents the elderly parents are saying, "Don't make us fuss, dear," and the sons and daughters making a fuss about what they want and what they like with the food and beverages being served.
Very true. It's very true. Very true.
So you gave a few kind of distinctions about, the silence, what their, their personality types are, because that's so useful to think then about the food service that we want to give them. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely, yeah. Silents are really kind of the most traditional or conservative. I say conservative not in the political sense, but just kind of in how they approach things. They tend to be conformist. They were the age and the mindset when they were being raised that, you just kind of went with the flow, and those are the things. You didn't really cause a lot of ruckus about things.
Yeah, that's a good point. My mum's 88, still very alert, pretty slow on her feet, but, I'm sort of getting hot under the collar about a few things, and she's, no, just don't worry about it,
Yeah, don't raise a fuss. Don't
That's
really
it.
deal with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the food, it's really kind of interesting. They kind of have this waste not, want not mentality. They want quality. They appreciate things that are simply prepared, simply served, but it's got to be done well. And they don't want to see a lot of things wasted. Time, effort, food. So they really like that kind of quality and simplicity in their dining approach.
So you've got that segment, and they're coming to you for like every meal. You're serving them 2 or 3 meals a day in your dining room, or
it depends on the type of setting. We could spend another whole entire podcast talking about the different segments of inside senior living, as far as independent and assisted and the skilled nursing. But typically, anywhere from 1 to 3 meals a day is being offered.
Right. So you said here that these are people who they want simplicity, but they want quality. Every food service place, always tells us the best quality, whatever we may think about that. But what does quality mean to these people?
It really is in the execution. You could serve them the most simple item, like lasagna, a very basic meal that doesn't take a lot to do. But if you don't prepare it with, the right quality, with the right products, they will notice.
It's a bit greasy, or it's too much sauce or not enough sauce.
Exactly, and they are not hesitant to point out when it's not quality. They just have that expectation. It doesn't need to be fancy, but it needs to be done right.
Yeah. So let's talk about the baby boomers, who's the younger segment. Tell us about how the challenges of working with that group.
Yeah, they are. You would think with them being so close that they would be similar in how they approach things, but they are very different. They tend to really think about what's best for them, but themselves when they're looking at dining and food service. They're much more experimental. They'll go and they'll try new things. They're open to different cuisines that they haven't experienced. Very adaptable in that way. And when it comes to thinking about what their expectations are, they're more of a how does this make me feel group. They don't. They want the quality and everything, but they want the products and the services that they consume to really kind of show their status
and the whole experience, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Places to be seen and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you can see just by kind of thinking and looking at those two descriptions how very different boomers are from their parents.
Yeah. Well, the silent ones and the noisy ones maybe. Yeah. I heard an observation recently too, talking about baby boomers. This enormous segment of people, but these are people who are often have had people working for them. They've been the manager in a situation so they're used to, people doing what they're asked and people looking after them, and if they've got some young punk server who's, ignoring them or whatever, it's just not on.
Right. Yeah, no. And they're very vocal. They'll say, this isn't meeting my needs. What's going on here? And they want that, they want their status and their level kind of verified and justified, if you will.
Yeah. So in the food service in your organisations, you've got a lot of baby boomers as well there?
Not as many. We've had, my experience has been, we've get a few kind of in that top range, that maybe 65 to 70. A lot of times they're typically single baby boomers, who may or may not have a family. And so what they're looking for is kind of an opportunity to have a place that can be maintained while they travel and visit family and live their
right.
retirement out.
And it's just kind of easy living they're wanting, an easy base in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like a home base that they know somebody is taking care of for them year round.
So let's just step outside into the world of restaurants in the local towns and cities. When you when we're in food service, we never stop watching and making comments and noticing things, do we? That drive our family crazy.
Right.
But what do you see some places doing? How are you seeing places being successful with both of these groups, who are out in the restaurant, independent restaurants?
It really, looking at their menus, I think it's a matter of kind of understanding where each group's coming from and figuring out how to kind of capture all of that at the same time. And it sounds, it can sound really daunting to maybe look at that. But I think there's some interesting ways people can kind of embrace both and maybe kind of capture some of these different segments in that senior living or the senior age group.
Because I often think about, with restaurants, the more focused they are on, maybe one or two segments, whether that's ages or, ethnic groups or a cuisine style or something, they're more successful. Trying to be all things to all people is, usually it gets a bit, the menu gets a bit dull.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily, that corner cafe that has the 3-page menu that has 100 items. I think that's not necessarily what they need to do. I think it's a matter of just being a little more strategic with how they plan their menus and maybe kind of how their environment sets up to be able to do that. Because
What would be on your checklist then if you were advising for a new restaurant that was going to be opening, nearby, that wanted to cater, that knew there was this huge number of people, in the 60 to 80 age group who are, still driving and still love going out?
Right. I think when you look at menus and kind of menu choices, it's you want to stay somewhat traditional to be able to capture that older age group in that 60 to 100 span. But I think you can kind of do a little bit of that spin on traditional that can entice the younger half, the boom, if you will.
Yeah, the modern comfort food kind of thing.
Exactly. I think those are probably the types of places that can have the most success. It doesn't mean that somebody that, specializes in, say, Italian or Chinese or some other, specific ethnic food or something like that can't do something. But I just think, if you want to bring both groups together and kind of have a bigger get your arms kind of around it thing, I think that's the way to kind of look at it.
Yeah. And one thing, of course, which I just think is, it's good manners and good design, is just to kind of manage the acoustics in a place as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Lighting and acoustics when you're looking at that environment is super important. Obviously the older people get there, they have vision problems, the hearing problems come about, and typically when these groups go out, and this is probably the same for both, it's a social experience. When you're like me and you're a working guy doing working for a living, sometimes lunch is just that. You're stopping, you're grabbing food, and you're back on the job. But these individuals are really looking to be out.
Yeah, this is a way to fill the day, isn't it? This each one is a sort of a little bit of a landmark in some ways.
It is. It really is. If you look at the senior communities where people are living, the dining experience, the dining room is the focal point. It's kind of just like at home, the dining room and the kitchen is where people gather. It's the same thing with, food just does that for people.
Yeah, so in our restaurant we need to, just got to keep that in mind. I think of my favourite pizza place, which is not that far from where I live, and it's a busy, buzzy, very modern, interesting menu, but they have done so much work on the acoustics in the place. In fact, when you look closely, all the walls are acoustically lined, and the benefit is they really obsessed with their music and jazz. You can hear this wonderful music, you can talk to each other, and no one is missing out because there's no racket.
Yeah. And
everyone has the pleasure, but boy, that's an issue that is usually overlooked in most places.
Definitely. And when you print your menus, making sure that they're, easy to read. A lot of times people will look at these really fancy fonts, or they'll do something with some weird numbering that they do, and just kind of keeping it basic and easy to read.
Yes.
You can do a lot of things with graphics and that to improve your menus.
Yeah, and I think that cuts across, all segments, because, those sales prevention officers, as I call them, the people who do those unreadable menus and those tiny 8-point type, even on, the descriptions on wine bottles, sometimes you actually do want to read that just to find out a little bit more. And boy, they really go for tiny text.
Exactly. It's almost one of those things where you want to train your servers to be able to talk about the food more, because this is a group that would be receptive of that.
Yeah.
As far as hearing.
So on our checklist, we've got obviously the acoustics and the lighting. We've got kind of modern spin on traditional and kind of maybe we should call it understandable food. The classics. Right. Any other things that you would? What about all the things that the doctors said you can't have this, you can't have that? How do we incorporate that without driving the kitchen crazy?
Well,
you can't.
The good news, well, that's true. I think sometimes I'm not a chef, and so I think sometimes the kitchen can be difficult. However, I think that there's some things that actually can be done that will really make the kitchen kind of embrace this group. The first one that always jumps to my mind is, I call it the flavor conundrum, if you will. By the age of 74, most people have lost about 55% of their taste buds.
Okay.
And so because of that, it's really hard for those flavors that we're used to, as we're kind of going through life, to be able to enjoy them as much. And salt is obviously another item that, you add a little more salt, it brings out more flavor. But we all know that sodium is an issue for older adults.
Yeah,
so
like our Western diet, our culinary traditions are built on sugar, salt, and fat, aren't they, for flavour enhancement and all our cooking methods?
They really are. And so because of that, you really have to think about, how do I enhance the flavor without really dragging all these other possible issues in?
Yeah.
And so, really a focus on like freshness, fresh herbs and fresh spices. That's something that can be done. And think about some of the more common flavorings that you could really just enhance. Garlic and lemon, things like that can really be, if used too much for someone, my age with a palate that hasn't gotten that way yet, it might be good to add a little bit more of that.
Yeah, and basil and some of these different herbs that pesto. I love it when people use pesto because I think it's just such a great flavour enhancement and. Everyone likes
absolutely
it.
Yeah, and it's something that everybody's a little familiar with. It's kind of one of those it's a traditional item, but you can make pestos out of a lot of things.
Yeah,
You can have that spin, like we were talking about earlier, and just kind of bring it all together with something like that.
Yeah. So there's a whole new lot of challenges for chefs who are creative and who want to be clever. There's a whole lot of clever cooking here, isn't there?
Absolutely.
About food with big flavours that are traditional, not too much. We want to avoid the chili heat.
Right.
And we want to keep the sodium down and the sugar down, and oh my God, you can see people giving up. But this is just modern. This is modern cooking.
Exactly. One of the companies I've worked for, they actually, a large company here in the States, they actually developed their own line of flavorings and seasonings that they would put into recipes and provide on the tables to do just that, to enhance those. And then most of them were low or no sodium. So it's really something that I think chefs can embrace and have a lot of fun with. How
are your chefs handling that? Are they... do you get some enthusiasm there with this?
We do. A lot of times, we tell them, we have recipes that we want you to follow, but there are times when they can step out and kind of do their own thing and have their own specials, because they have in our settings, they have a lot of the same people every day, and so we want them to stay away from boring. So we tell our chefs, be creative, have fun with it. Get out there and get some feedback.
Go and have a walk around and hear what everyone, because they'll tell you.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's really no different than in a really nice restaurant. The chef you want the chef out in the dining room talking to the customers.
Yeah,
the same in that senior setting.
Yeah, nice. I'm thinking with you saying about we lose half our taste buds by 74. It's just making me think about sort of all the warnings about having iPods in our ears the whole time and people losing their hearing, and I'm sort of a little bit late to certainly use my iPod every morning when I go walking, but lots of people, anyway, we're not talking about music and deafness here, but it's similar.
Definitely.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So the key things we need to focus on in sort of the dietary thing. Obviously, we got things like diabetic, low sodium, gluten. Is gluten free for this older age group now suddenly as huge as it seems to be for younger?
It really, I think it's sort of started with older adults, and it's kind of expanded itself down. You read all the time about the gluten intolerance that people are seeing, and I think that's what's kind of caught fire with the restaurant industry. But actually having a gluten or a celiac disease, it's interesting because most of the new patients that are diagnosed, about a third of them are over the age of 65.
Oh, really?
And the median age of the diagnosis is 50. So most of these adults that are getting diagnosed with the celiac disease or the gluten disease are older adults. And so, it's good that they're really focusing on that kind of production in restaurants.
But they've had to kind of come to a screaming halt with, their traditional meal of, having a sandwich or, or pasta and all those things that they're, because by that age you're in some pretty set patterns with what you like to eat, aren't you?
You are, but, that's the nice thing about, kind of that one works really well with the flavors that we were talking about earlier, because you can be creative. And, if you're doing a lot of fresh things, you're doing, like the pestos and things like that, you can really pull away from those gluten items.
And look, the fakes, they're not really fakes, but, the gluten-free bread and the gluten-free pasta and all those things, they're really very high quality now. It's not, like kind of strange sponge bread like it used to be. It's,
right.
I guess it's the demand. The demand is so enormous. It's really pushed innovation in those areas in a really great way.
It really has, yeah. The products, just, when I first started dealing with it in senior living, probably about 8 years ago was when it really got into my world. The products that we tried to use for that were just awful.
Yeah.
But now they're great. I mean, I've actually used some gluten-free bread mixes, and they're a little denser than normal bread, but otherwise you can't really tell the difference. It's really good.
Yeah, no, that's a really good news story, I think, there. Now, you mentioned a couple of medications and vitamin K. What are we talking about here?
Coumadin or warfarin.
This is the one for blood thinning people, thinning the blood for. Is that for high? No, not so much for blood pressure. What is it for? Anti-clotting?
Anti-clotting. It can be used for a lot of different things, but that's the main one. But what really happens is you can have a really bad reaction if there's a high vitamin K intake in your body.
Okay.
And so, one of the things that we've had to develop in senior dining that restaurants can really take and maybe look at is the leafy greens and dark green vegetables. That's the vitamin K color, if you will.
Okay. All that kale that everyone's into now.
Exactly. If you're on that Coumadin, it's not good for you.
Okay. Interesting.
So if you're looking at your restaurant menu, it'd be good to look at what other options are there. Can you be creative with?
So we're talking
vegetables?
Salad, raw, or any leafy greens.
Any leafy greens, spinach that you can cook. Even like broccoli has some vitamin K in it. Not as much as like spinach, but just making sure that you have. If you're going to use them, maybe in a mix or something, a vegetable blend. Maybe use a little less when you you have those older adults.
Or there's just other go for red vegetables rather than
exactly
the green ones. Interesting.
Kind of have a good mix there.
And what about alcohol too? What does that go with and not go with?
Well, the big concern is pain medication and blood thinners. You can really have the alcohol can really have a major impact on their effectiveness. And so those seniors that are out, in the public dining, they're really going to be more hesitant to purchase alcohol if they're on some of these medications. So, one of the things that I would recommend to an operator is to teach their staffs to be a little more focused when they're trying to upsell alcohol, and so maybe offer a higher quality wine or something that really is, kind of thinking of that quality or that status item. And so you're not going to have the volume, so maybe you won't sell 2 or 3 glasses, but you might sell one that's $5 or $6 more because of it.
Right, good tip. And quality non-alcoholic options as well, because usually it's like, what's the alternative? Sodas or mineral water? How boring,
Exactly. It's a good opportunity to look at. One of the things that I've kind of seen out there in the restaurant industry is the like Italian sodas. Starbucks is doing.
Yeah.
Those are really great. They're low
with a slightly
sugar.
bitter kind of adult flavor to them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You could do like a mojito version of something like that.
Yeah.
And just kind of have a nice
lime and bitters, those sorts of things. Yeah. Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So we got a lot of things for our kitchen to juggle with, but really, I guess it's shifting our thinking to think, okay, this is all the wonderful things we can work with, rather than, there's all these things now. I can't do this and I can't do that, and I got to take that out. If we're thinking of subtracting, it's all becomes a bit tiresome, doesn't it? But if we're thinking of just, let's start with, here's everything we can use. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the way. And I know that there's a push for people to kind of think a little more simply and cleanly when they're preparing food. And that's a great approach when it comes to this age group of people. Just being able to even promote that and saying, we use fresh ingredients and, we don't add a lot of extra to it. It's just great, simple food. Maybe the wording is different, but that kind of mindset of we do this really well, and it's very fresh and
Yeah.
appetizing, I really think can be a good approach and a good
Nice.
strategy.
Yeah. So let's talk about service. We've got, the style of service that we're going to have as, our standard in a different place. But then we've got to have a whole bunch of people who are going to deliver that as well. And so just with the style of service, we've got traditional, typical restaurant service. Well, there's many varieties of that.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say with the silence, that kind of sit down dining is still very approachable for them. Some of these newer kind of concepts, maybe the more adventurous ones will dabble into that. But having a traditional setting for that older age group is definitely something that they'll kind of be
and I'm just thinking
towards.
about whenever I've been to the States in large cities and the wait that you're expected to for us Aussies and lots of people out of the US, we cannot believe that people would wait for an hour and a half for a table or something. But
Exactly.
that for seniors, that's just kind of completely off the list. They're just never going to be able to do that. So I guess having reservations, a well-run reservation will be important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just having, there are a lot of great online services that you can use for reservations. And I think just having that accessibility.
Will our seniors use those? Will they use online reservation systems as confidently?
They are gaining more and more experience on, being online and using technology.
Yeah, well, our baby
and so
boomers certainly embrace it. They're sitting there with their iPad or their Kindle reading while they're waiting for their friends to arrive.
Exactly. And when you think about that dynamic between the family dynamic of boomers and silence together, having that option is definitely great because they can get that reservation time and know it's there.
Yeah.
And it really helps them with their older parent, if you will.
Yeah, nice. Okay. So what about the staff, the right staff for this? Because just as we've sort of talked about how for chefs this is maybe seen as, not the most prestigious kind of thing to have on your CV, working in, a senior institution or home, we often think of that's kind of like for, what's the sort of people we're going to attract and how do we keep them focused?
Right. Well, I think the big thing for, looking at staff as far as selecting staff and training staff is really getting them to understand that this age group still expects service the right way. Us younger generations we've got that 10-second, mind span of, okay, we got this done, we move to this, and we just kind of go multitask and do all these different things. This age group still wants that service. They'll stop and they'll enjoy it, and they kind of still expect it.
Yeah.
Paying attention to detail, having a good personality, interacting, that's all definitely important. As you described
that, hang on, that's exactly the kind of person I want in any situation. They notice things, they move quickly, they clear and deliver. They don't, they're kind of attentive to people's needs.
I think in that sense, you're not really looking for a different type of person for this age group. I think where it gets a little more interesting, or maybe you have to be a little differently focused, is on how you train them.
Tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the different needs, the waste not, want not, and the what's in it for me for the different groups. Letting, kind of teaching your staff and training them to understand those mindsets and to kind of, you may have to kind of guesstimate someone's age. I mean, but you can kind of tell within the first few minutes of talking with somebody what their kind of expectation is.
Yeah.
And so really letting them know that they need to focus on this kind of mindset for this particular type of person can really help them as far as getting the right kind of service.
And being helpful and serving without being patronising as well. It's like say someone is I saw it the other day. Someone was a bit hard of hearing, an elderly woman. So the way this woman was speaking to her was like she was a stupid child, sort of speaking loudly and slowly, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. And so, it's just remembering that they want that service. They expect it to be just like it was when, back in the golden age of fine dining, if you will, for them. Another area for training for them, leading them to understand what menu items are the items to try and upsell. We just talked a little bit about, alcohol and ideas for upselling there. Yeah. Letting your staff know those kinds of items on the menu when somebody comes in who's older. Don't focus on the wine. Focus on these drinks here. Or maybe you've got a small plates menu for that older age group that is perfectly, it's perfect size, perfect portions, and it's right up their alley. You might be able to upsell some of those versus this big meal to them. And so kind of being able to get them to understand which items make the most sense can really push up that kind of
that portion size thing. I often see that as, just not being handled well with a lot of seniors. In Australia, we have a lot of like sporting and recreational clubs, which they have slot machines, which give them plenty of money, and they often have very inexpensive meals. And so they got a lot of seniors who come along and enjoy them, but they're still serving these huge meals, crazy sizes, and it's just... Yeah, that it flies against that thing we talked about before about, no waste and you don't leave things on your plate.
Exactly. Yeah, here in the United States, I think they're starting to get away from that mindset of more is better on the plate, and that kind of ties right into this. But yeah, I definitely see a lot of older adults who they don't want all the food. They don't want to waste it, or it's too much. And so, upselling that right item can be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So again, we've got this new restaurant that's opened up in town, and they know there's this massive population of baby boomers and even the silents as well, and they want to reach out to them. For all the other populations, they're hopefully putting a lot of effort into their website and social media and those sorts of things. But what are your suggestions for marketing?
Well, I believe there's some really good opportunities, and if you focus in the right way, I think you can even capitalize on some times of the day when maybe you wouldn't normally have business. One of the things we talked about how, dining for seniors is a social activity. Well, there are a number of different social groups. One that, I don't know if you have this in Australia, but the Red Hat Society. A lot of older ladies, I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this for a decade. I still don't understand it, but they
still haven't let you into the secret.
I'm still not in on the secret, but they wear their hat, they get dressed up, they wear their red hats, and it is an event.
So they go out and eat together. Is it like have a meal together?
Out. Absolutely. And we've catered in our communities to some of these groups. And so that's looking for groups like that. Yes. Are perfect way to capture, for catering.
Right. So what, everyone will book together, or a bus will arrive full of this group, or how does?
Absolutely, yeah. Another thing they can do is, partnering with that retirement community that has those seniors. You can come up with all kinds of different ideas from them. There's some really neat things that we've done in our communities that I think restaurants could really embrace.
Yeah, tell me some of those.
Hour opportunities, cooking classes. Have your chefs offer cooking classes, or maybe have a sommelier or your mixologist offer a wine or spirits tasting.
Nice, very nice. Yeah,
do it at like 2 p.m.
Yeah,
because these are retired people for the most part. It's a perfect opportunity to get people in the door, charge for the class a minimal fee to get in, then offer food and drinks. And,
yes. I mean, cooking classes are so massive by restaurants that cotton onto this. They can just do so well with them. And I hadn't thought of this as another senior, focused just for a senior group as well.
Yeah, and then when you think about a cooking class, you might even go into more of the nutritional side of it, and think about some of those like fresh flavors and some of those other items we talked about earlier, and focus it that way. You really can drag a lot of people in. My
mother was telling me about one some of her friends went along to, which was, clever ways with your microwave, which is not something I'd go along to. But she said, it was really popular. And actually the way she described what they were doing, it was certainly not about, how to take something out of the freezer and how many seconds to blast it. It was really, it was clever, like how to cook fresh greens with a little bit of water in a sealed dish. So you actually were cooking greens instead of deciding greens were too much trouble, that sort of.
Exactly. Yeah. I've actually even experimented with cooking vegetables in the microwave because I read an article where you do that. If you could cook it just enough to get it to the right doneness, you actually save some of that nutritional value.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting idea, but there's a lot of different things that your chef or your experts in the restaurant.
And I do a fair bit of work with these clubs in Australia, and I'm always pushing them to have wine and food dinners, but ones that are appropriate for their senior group. And when they do them, it just goes crazy. It's very popular. Or actually the easier one to start with, if they've got a conservative constituency, is a beer and food dinner, because all the men will come along and, they all got opinions about this, and, with some craft beers and things like that. And just gets people out of the house and coming along, getting used to, food as a social occasion, with a large group, and can just be a real winner.
Yeah, absolutely. When you do those partnerships with those senior type living situations, that's where you can really do that, because a lot of these places will have they call him an activity director or a lifestyle coordinator or a concierge even, and those people are responsible for, and they are
constantly looking for activities.
They're looking for something to be able to put on their calendars. Because they're not just for activities for the residents, but they're also marketing tools. They bring people in.
Yes.
And so, being able to have that bus that says, has the community's name on the side, driving through town and parking at this well-known restaurant.
And the sales director who's taking some potential residents through when there's a cocktail tasting on, that'll be a good look, I think, too.
Exactly.
No, and all of these, are absolutely things that could happen in regular restaurants.
Absolutely, yeah. So these were things that we've done in our settings that I thought when we kind of talked a little bit about this. These are perfect for restaurants to capture business and just build a bigger customer base from this age group.
Yeah, nice. So I mean, you're a social media user, because that's how we met, through Twitter, I think, originally, and LinkedIn. But is social media appropriate for reaching out to? Well, lots of baby boomers are using social media, but what's your thoughts?
No, it's interesting. There's you'd be surprised at some of the statistics on seniors and social media. The fastest growing demographic on social networks is actually 74 plus, age-wise. An interesting fact that I read, there's a great infographic that wishpond.com has.
Are you giving me a link to that? I'll put that in the show notes for the
very good stuff. That age group that I just mentioned, 47 times the net worth of households headed by someone 35 and older.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's a lot of potential disposable income right there. So you definitely.
And I think the thing that it's kind of technically not social media, but photos is the thing that cuts across this. And the olden days, my an elderly aunt used to open her purse and she'd pull out an envelope. She'd always have new photographs, and she'd be showing this.
Yep.
Well, the other day I saw three grannies sitting around, and they all had their mobile phones up, and they were flicking through the photos, all three of them. I love it.
It's great.
Sure, it's not all of them by any means, but
very true.
Any way we can encourage the photo sharing, or say, I know one of the managers of one of these big clubs, when they have all these sporting activities, senior sporting activities, says, ladies, all the photos are going to be up on the blog, and they all know what a blog is now, and they know where to go, and because they want to see the photos. It didn't take them too long to.
That's right. The places where people are going, the seniors are going online, are really kind of geared towards that. They use Google a lot. They're on Facebook. And one of the major reasons they're on Facebook is to stay in touch with family and to look at pictures.
That's it.
So, you make a great point. I was kind of reading some of the statistics. 30% of the seniors on social media are sharing photos.
Mm-hmm.
That they're connecting with family and sharing photos. Those are the two big things that they do on social media.
Yep, and when it comes to they're doing health research and driving the doctor crazy,
exactly.
Maybe booking travel, doing their online banking or whatever. But it's just I think a huge mistake to underestimate how much that senior group is online. So let's reach out to them. There.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and YouTube is another great area, another place for them to go. Because it's, videos are becoming much more commonplace with everyone. And, you look at some of the restaurants that do some of these kind of behind the scenes, or this is how we prepare these dishes. You can really focus some great ideas that we've talked about into a YouTube video. And post a link on your Facebook page and send something out through Twitter, and the next thing you know, you've got too many seniors to feed.
Yeah, well, one of these other clubs that I have a lot to do with, the manager realised there was a lot of photographers there, and he got a photography club started when they were all, slightly kind of crazy people. But he's now got, the most wonderful resource for whenever he needs photos taken of all sorts of events and everything like that, because, getting good professional photos done by someone who that's just their job, you're going to get much better than if you or I want to take photos as well as managing everything else. We do what we can, but oftentimes you're too busy or something. And this is a really great conversation, Aaron. Really appreciate all the thought you put into preparing for it today. It's been great. And
it's interesting to think about the kind of the divergence between what I do and being out there in the restaurant side of things. A lot of what we've been doing in my sector for the past few years really is kind of shifting the way we provide our services to be more like restaurants.
Right.
One of the places that I worked at, one of the communities I was at, we actually spent time developing our own bistro concept. It was kind of a nice marriage between Starbucks and Panera. And it was a different option. We looked at, implementing kind of a little club bar area. And so these are the kinds of things that are happening in senior living. And I think restaurants can kind of capitalize on that shift in how we provide services in our sector to match up to that. So then it becomes kind of a seamless transition back and forth.
My mum, the retirement village where my mum lives, they've just got the espresso machine in, and they are loving it, I tell you. They are, because they're all actually quite fussy about the quality of coffee. And
coffee is a big one.
The management suddenly realised there's an opportunity here. So, it's fully automated, but then they can do a great job. Fully automated
Absolutely.
Machines. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Now, how do people contact with you?
Well, the two easiest ways, you mentioned Twitter. I'm on Twitter at ahfish. I like to send out information that I read on the industry, and love just reaching out and connecting with people and learning that way. Another way that people can reach out to me is on LinkedIn. I find that's a great place to to as well. So just go.
That's where the grown-ups connect, isn't it?
Something like that, yeah. So, but I've had a lot of success, reaching out and connecting and networking on those two areas. So those are the best places to find me.
Fantastic, and I'll put the links to both links to you in the show notes. So, Aaron, really, thank you so much for your thoughtfulness and your time and your creativity. With all the things you're doing. I'm thanking you for all the people who enjoy the food that you organise in different ways, but you've given us some great information as well.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and this has been a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you. Cheers.
ProfitableHospitality.com, your source of information and inspiration for running a successful hospitality business. ProfitableHospitality.com.